Welcome to Out with Dan, the podcast that spotlights and examines the voices of LGBTQ+ authors, characters, and our allies. Together, we lift our voices and we tell our stories. I'm Dan White. Join me as I chat with this week's author. Hello and welcome back to Out with Dan. Today I'm excited to talk to Canwen Xu about Boring Asian Female. Canwen, this is her debut novel, but she's appeared in the Washington Post, the Kansas City Star, Chalkbeat, Arrow Magazine, and others. So welcome, Canwen.
Thank you.
So what does it feel like for your debut novel?
Well, I'm very excited, obviously, about it, but I do feel like I've just been sitting on this huge thing for 2 years now since, for those of you who aren't as familiar with the publishing process, I sold this book to Penguin Random House in July of 2024, and it's just now coming out. So I'm very excited, but I also am kind of feeling like it'll be nice to not have this thing looming in the future and just enjoy it in the moment. Yeah.
It'll be nice to show off your child after a 2-year incubation period, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So you grew up in some very diverse cities in this country that I would not associate with an Asian background. So let me ask first and foremost, did you move to these cities because of one or both your parents' careers?
Yeah, my dad is a professor. So yeah, so that's why I was living in these places. It's kind of funny also explaining this to people from other countries, but just because of American history, a lot of universities are just in very small towns. Like if you actually look at, a lot of universities, like a lot of them are in small towns. And I think it has something to do with land grants back in the day. So yeah, so I lived kind of in the middle of nowhere for most of my life. Yeah.
You did. And so one year I was watching the TV show Fargo. I'd already seen the movie years ago. And I was chatting with a friend of mine on Instagram, and I booked a trip to Sioux Falls, which I know is a place you lived. The next year I went to Fargo, which I know is a place you lived. I've not been to Boise. I've been to eastern Idaho, but I've not been to Boise. So, and I watched your TED Talk, which I do highly recommend for people because I really loved it. It gave, your TED Talk is so full of information about you, but not anger, which I was very impressed by that because it must have been difficult. And I say that with all grace and humility, to live in a place that you were sort of an outsider.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that you came through that with grace. Now let's talk about Boring Asian Female. So when I got the pitch from your publicist, I'm like, yes, I'm all over this because it's been a long time since I was in college, and I told Canwen before we started chatting, before I started recording, that the college experience in today's world is very different than when I was in college. We had computers, but not an availability to use the internet. So we could do computer programming. Now everything's at the touch of a finger. So tell where the genesis of this book came from.
Yeah, well, so as you mentioned, I grew up in North Dakota, South Dakota, and Idaho. So, and then I moved to New York to attend Columbia for college. And that was just the craziest transition of my life. And I think now that I'm out in the quote unquote real world, I still look back on my 4 years at Columbia and I'm like, I can't believe that was what that was like. Just the amount of, I don't know. I think it's just you have a lot of different people in a very small enclosed community. And it's like people from all different backgrounds. As in you have people who are literally sons and daughters of billionaires or Russian oligarchs. And then you have people who used to sleep in their car with their mom. And and I think because of all of the disparities, there is a lot of class resentment, racial resentment. And it was just all boiling in this community. So I wanted to write about that. I also wanted to write about failure. I have always been drawn to stories about when someone, it basically has like a fall from the top. And this came from my own experience of getting this really prestigious internship and then not getting the return offer. So kind of I basically just wanted to combine all of these together, and then obviously this idea of female friendship as well.
I love it. And, I think that when you go to college, I believe that, you're on a higher academic level than some others, but there's a hierarchy in college as well. There are those that are pretty unpopular, those that are smart, those who are jocks and stuff like that. And while it's interesting to see a lot hasn't changed, it is interesting to see what has changed. So one thing I was a little surprised about, and I guess because when I was in college, death wasn't talked about. So does do universities send out a notification when a student dies to the other students?
Yes, every single time someone dies. Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
So I will say that that was so foreign to me because I know for us, at 60, you're I'm of the generation where we didn't talk about death and dying, and it was very private. Whereas I think it must be a little disconcerting to get these notices, but at the same time, maybe it's comforting. I don't know. So what is it? What is the experience of receiving one of these death notices like for other students?
Well, I think that the general feeling is that transparency was always better than secrecy, even if the consequences, even if there are negative consequences. So I think that it was expected that every time a student passes away, you would get a notice. And it was very concerning because you like there was one year where there happened to be a lot of suicides in a single month, and then you just got a notification for all of them. That was really terrible, right? That didn't help morale, but at the same time, to not hear about it would feel like they were trying to brush the issue away, or just not talk about something that was actually really important. So but I actually didn't even know that previously, that this was something that was not announced. That's actually very that's news to me, since when I was writing this I was like, well, if there's a death, then the school will definitely announce it. Otherwise it's just not going to be it's not going to be realistic. Yeah.
Right. Which I mean, I loved. So when I was in college, girls being attacked was really beginning to be brought to the forefront. And the university I went to, they created this system of lights and telephones, emergency telephones throughout the entire university campus. And they were very close together. So you were never too far away from help. Because up until that time, anybody who'd been attacked, even those things were kept brushed under the rug.
Hmm.
So I
Yeah.
do. I like the fact that we're notified, and I think that's what I think it's wonderful. Unusual to me, but still wonderful.
Yeah.
So now let's get into a little bit of the meat of Boring Asian Female. So give the audience a setup of what this book is about.
Yeah, so Boring Asian Female follows the protagonist, Elizabeth, who's done everything right in her life. She's gotten good grades, she got into an Ivy League school, and now her goal is to get into Harvard Law School so that can become rich and powerful. And then all of the people who ignored her throughout her life will be like, man, like I shouldn't have ignored her. So basically, just to impress all these people. And she thinks that she's done everything she can to achieve that goal, but she finds out actually that she was rejected. So she becomes obsessed with another girl in her year at Columbia who she finds out did get in, and just becomes obsessed and stalkerish and really unhinged. So it just spirals from there.
Well, and I think when I got the pitch, I will say that I think I was really rooting for Elizabeth because unfortunately, I think being seen is a phrase we hear often nowadays, whereas I think that's much more of a current thing. And I think being seen for who we are and what we've accomplished is important to us. It's how we validate ourselves.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
felt sorry for Elizabeth because she does get good grades. She's done a great job. She's worked hard, and she still doesn't attain her goal.
yeah, exactly. And it's funny that you said you were really rooting for her, since I I guess when I first wrote the character, I actually and maybe this is so crazy to say this, but I really was like, oh yeah, this isn't an unlikable character. This is just someone who's very honest, you know. And then, yeah, you know, once the book is like out with more people reading it, they're like, wow, this is like a terrible person, a terrible character. And I guess my perspective is like, yes, you know, I think it's true. She's very emotionally immature. I think that she
Yes.
has a lot of growth to do, but I actually think that she is just being very, very honest, you know,
Yeah.
with someone who's in her situation, feels not seen and overlooked. And this is just an honest manifestation of that. And yeah, so I thought, I think it's great that you were rooting for her regardless.
So I am a dark writer and I love dark genres, and I don't always go for the goody two shoe. Like, I
Mhm.
will say Yunjin, I sort of wanted to drown her a little bit during the book because she is definitely the good girl in the group. And you know what? There was always one of those. There was always a good boy. And
Mhm.
I like them. I root for them, but I happen to be, I know what it's like not to be seen.
Mhm.
Having grown up gay in the South, I wasn't always seen. Oh, I was seen, but not in a positive way. I was
Yeah.
seen because there was pointing and jeering and cheering, and well, rarely cheering, but there was a lot of conversation that I wasn't included in. The conversation was about me, and I sort of felt like Elizabeth was that way a little bit on the fact that she checked off all the boxes she needed to check off. She'd done all the right things, and yet she still didn't get accepted by Harvard. And that
Mhm.
has to be a heartbreaking situation for anybody. You know, you have a school you want to get into. She believes that she deserved it. And then what does that cause our psyche to happen? And you
Mhm.
write good psyche screwed up people.
um yeah, I think it's like, it's almost a, when she gets rejected from Harvard, it almost feels like she's rejected again, since when she was growing up in these places she felt rejected on the basis of just, you know, not fitting in. And I think in order to fit in, she just put all her eggs in this one basket of, you know, if I get into Harvard, it's like someone is recognizing me for how great I am. Um and and when that doesn't work out, that's, it's not just kind of the material part of not being able to go to Harvard. It's also just this acute psychological part of, you know, feeling like you've lost a part of your identity, or feeling that sense of rejection. And that's ultimately, I mean, scientists have studied this, right? Like, it's one of the most terrible things to happen to a human, to feel like you're left out of a social group.
Absolutely, absolutely. I was actually discussing that at lunch with a friend of mine yesterday that when I was in my early 20s, there was this party in Raleigh, North Carolina, that where all of the elite went to. I was never in the elite. I was in the back of the room, you know. So I mean, I was never invited to that party, and I remember feeling so dejected because no one would ever invite me to go to this damn Christmas party. But the truth is, I wasn't I wasn't their cup of tea, and truly, they weren't my cup of tea. I mean, now I wouldn't care. I wouldn't want to go now because what I realized is how snobby they were. They
Hmm.
also were very rich and pretentious, and I wasn't any of those things. I thought I wanted to be, but I didn't. You know, well,
Hmm.
I don't now anyway. So I,
Yeah.
I I think hopefully with age comes a bit of wisdom, not for everybody, but
Mhm.
hopefully, you know. And I think when we're young, there are things we want to attain and achieve. And if we don't, it breaks our heart.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I think that I do agree, though, that with age comes that wisdom of not going where you're not wanted. This took me a long time to figure out as well, since I found myself, you know, wanting to connect with certain people, but then not feeling able to connect with them. And now I'm at a point in my life where I'm like, you know what, I'm not trying so hard anymore. It's like, if I connect with this group, I connect with this group. If I don't feel like I can be myself and be my full self around them, then that they're not my people, and that's not personal, and that has nothing to do with my worth. That's just, it's just everyone has their place, right?
That's right. That's right. We all have a lane.
Mhm.
Maybe that's not my lane. Maybe I would like to be in that lane, but it's not my lane to be in.
Mhm. Exactly.
Well, I'm loving this. Are you going on tour with this book?
Yes. So I have a couple events at different festivals. I'm
Okay.
also doing a reading at Milkweed, a bookstore in Minneapolis, which I'm excited about since I'm going to be back in the Midwest, and also the Pittsburgh Book Festival and the Gold Coast Book Festival in Long Island. And then I'm really excited because next month I'm going to London and I have a few events there.
Wonderful. That is so wonderful. Again, the book is called Boring Asian Female. It's out on April 28th. It is so wonderful. And I'm going to say there's a twist at the end that I did not see coming, but it was so satisfying.
I'm glad you thought it was satisfying, since there have been others who said they hated it. So it's
well, so that's why when certain pitches come to me, when I'm like, yes, that's got Dan's name written all over it. So I will be thanking your publicist for sending you my way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I wish you the very, very best of luck with this.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Out with Dan. You can find more information about this podcast and its host at outwithdan.com, on Twitter at outwithdan, and on Instagram and Facebook at GoOutWithDan. This podcast is hosted by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, and the theme music is provided by bensound.com. Join us again soon for the next episode of Out with Dan.